Hey there, this is Steve. In the last few sessions, we've been talking a lot about oppression and what oppression looks like, and the fact that we live in an oppressive time and we need to cry out to God for deliverance. I want to talk about good leadership for a little while. When we look at Advent and look at the promises that Isaiah is giving us, uh, these promises have to do with positive things, not with negative things. I mean, some of it has to do with negative things. Freedom from oppression is a positive thing that has to do with a negative thing. Freedom from leaders that oppress us. That's a positive thing, but it really focuses on the negative thing. Well, I want to talk about just about the positive things for a little while. So first of all, I want to say that okay, it's easy to say that there's two kinds of leaders. There's good leadership, bad leadership. Bad leadership is the kind of leadership that lead people into oppression, that increase poverty and increase debt, that takes land away from people, and takes opportunities to be self-sustaining. It takes those away from people. But then there's good leadership, okay? But I just want to say this isn't just going to be a good, bad. It's not just talking about two kinds of leadership. It's about three kinds of leadership. But so the bad kind of leadership is oppressive leadership. That's evil leadership that we see a lot of right now. Good leadership, though, let's talk a little bit about what good leadership looks like. First of all, good leadership serves other people. It serves other people. In other words, it's not just focused on oneself and one's own political motives and obtaining more power and more opportunity and greater resources for the self, but instead focuses on other people. That's a basic thing. This is why both political people in political leadership and in church leadership are called ministers. They're called ministers because they're actually supposed to serve other people. They're supposed to minister to other people. The focus is not supposed to be on themselves and what they can gain or how much power they can obtain, but how they can help other people. We don't see that as much right now, but there are some people who really are going to work for those who are good. Now, the thing is that it isn't just that good leadership works only for people for people in general, for the wealthy people, the middle class, and the poor. That's great. We definitely want people like that, but we want people who are especially going to work for the poor. Isaiah chapter 11 says, with justice, he will judge the poor and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. The true leader has her eye specifically on the needy. Now, why is that? Because wealthy people and middle class people, if they're living in a society that isn't oppressive, can take care of themselves. Even if there's an injustice, the courts are working for them and will look at things evenly for them. Poor people or marginalized people, those are the people who cannot get justice because they can't afford justice, and they can't. That nobody will look at them fairly, and the laws don't work in their favor. It always works against them, and so our hope, the hope of Isaiah, the promise of Isaiah, the promise of God, is that we will have leadership that will step in and take God's place and specifically look at people who are poor and marginalized, the people who aren't getting it. So, for instance, in the ancient world, God said, I need leaders who are going to step up and represent the widow and the orphan, who will especially help the widow and the orphan. Why? Because they have no opportunity for justice. They don't have a man to be able to help them. So I'm looking for leaders. Leaders, their specific job is to help the widow and the orphan and give them justice, despite the fact that the entire society is working against them. Even so, in our modern world, we have numbers of people who do not have representation, who cannot obtain justice. People who are extremely poor, people who are the immigrant, people who are houseless, who are mentally ill. People in foster care, kids in foster care, when they just get out of foster care, they're left on their own. What are they going to do? There are some services in some places that help them, but the fact is that we need leadership overall to say, hey, kids in foster care, we're going to help you and make sure that you get a foot up in society. There's other folks that do not have a voice in our legal system, and those are the people who we need leadership. Good leadership is going to focus on those people and make sure that they have a voice. Evil leadership, of course, will push them down and say, no, you guys don't get a voice. Please don't have anything to do with that. True leadership also has a vision for peace. Let me explain what I mean by this. So Isaiah talks about that the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the cow and the bear will graze, and the young lion and the lion will eat straw like the ox. And that's kind of a weird thing to think about, lions eating grass. And it's really crazy to think that a wolf is going to be able to lie down next to a lamb and not eat the poor thing. And you could say, well, this is all symbolic anyway, and it probably is symbolic. But the thing is that it's also possibly talking about the real life situation. You go, well, how could it possibly be that that a wolf will lie down next to a lamb and not eat it, unless it's just not hungry that day? And the thing is that, I mean, there have been work done. There's work done in which they have found the domestic gene, for instance. In the Soviet Union, there was a study on foxes that were being done, foxes that attacked humans, and they were able to retrain these foxes, or not retrain, but rebreed these foxes so that way they would be born without the instinct to attack other humans. And so they were completely tame, completely ready to be pets and to be taken care of. And so that seems like, well, that's impossible, or is it even good? Because would that even work with an ecosystem? I don't know. I'm not an expert in these areas, and I'm not a scientist. All I'm saying is that there are tools out there. There are God-given tools out there for us to create peace. We could create peace if we wanted to, if we worked at the tools and had plans to make these things happen, to make peace happen, even in the animal kingdom. But if we could do it in the animal kingdom, we could also do it in the human kingdom, if only peace is our goal. It can be done. But a good leader has a vision how to use these tools to create peace. Now, the thing is that we have certain tools that science has given us, and we're learning more about how societies work and how politics works and all of these things. And a good leader will use all these tools toward the purpose of peace and for society to work together and to bring in marginalized people. The bad leader will use these same tools to oppress people, to stir up fear, and to quote, kill the bad guys, to get rid of the bad guys. And so that's a clear distinction that is made in Scripture, that the good leader will be working toward that wolf and lamb model. And the bad leader will be working more toward the turn your garden implements into swords, that sort of thing. Now, remember I said that there were three kinds of leadership. There's good leaders and bad leaders, and that's pretty easy to say. I don't think anybody would have any problem with that. But then there's a third kind of category that I want to talk about, which are weak leaders. Leaders who do not have the strength or stamina to see a vision out to the end. And so, for instance, Isaiah chapter 53 talks about the kind of leader that he wants to see. I will allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the booty with the strong, because he poured himself out to death. The thing is that God is looking for leaders who are willing to sacrifice themselves. The fact is that we can set up plans, but we are never going to actually see a peace, whether it be temporary or long-lasting, unless we have leaders who are willing to sacrifice themselves. I'm not talking about everybody, but there are certain people who need to stand up and sacrifice themselves for us to obtain peace in our society. So it's easy for us, and I will say almost all leaders, even the good leaders, are weak leaders. Almost all the leaders that we really hold in esteem are weak leaders because they are not willing to give up their political station. They are not willing to give up their power. They're not willing to give up the monies that they have in order to establish peace. They're not willing to give up their lives and their health and their well-being for the sake of others to have peace. That's the real leader. The real leader, the true leader, knows when to lay down their own lives for their people. And we look at this and we say, well, see, that's what Jesus did. Jesus laid down his life. Jesus did, in the last thing we talked about, Wes and Josh, and how they couldn't finish. They had a vision of peace, but they couldn't finish it. But Jesus did. Jesus did finish his vision of peace. And so he's the leader. He's the ideal. And I agree, he is the ideal, but he is not the only one. Jesus is looking for people like you and like me to be a leader and to set ourselves aside in order to make a vision of peace happen, in order to establish a society that has compassion, love for each other, especially those who are marginalized and poor. And when Jesus left, he left his church in the hands of people like Peter, Thomas, who sacrificed themselves for peoples, so that way society can be better. It's the same as Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, or the prophet Isaiah himself that we've been talking about. Isaiah was supposed to, according to tradition, he was supposed to have been sawed in half in order to make sure that his message got out. But that's the same as Francis or Elijah or many others there. There are many people throughout church history who have set themselves aside in order to establish peace. And this is not an easy path. People who can show a path of justice and then sacrifice themselves to make sure that it happens, those people are few and far between. But those are the true leaders. Those are the people who God has established to really change this world and to make it a better place for us all. All right, that's all for now. May the Lord bless you and keep you and give you peace.